How do you define truth? A class I took this summer focused on truth made me think about this topic, and this was the first question asked in the first class. How do you define truth? The title of the class was Fiction, Lies, and Disbelief in Rabbinic Literature. I was intrigued by the seemingly irreverent title and signed up. As cliché as it might be, my first source for this assignment of what is truth was to look at the dictionary, and Merriam-Webster defines truth as the body of real things, events, and facts, or alternatively, as the state of being the case, actuality. To my biased brain, that sounds irrefutable. The definition I offered on that first day of class was an unvarnished and uninfluenced understanding of reality. Of course, in the 21st century, the meaning of truth is no longer simple. It wasn't ever really simple, though. Humans have always had moments in history where we, as a small group first, then as nations, and then even as the majority of the planet, accepted a new truth. Something that no one would have considered obvious before it was innovated. For instance, when the American Continental Congress declared, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." These sentences were not even considered true in the hearts of some of the people who signed on to it. Yet when it was written, perhaps many would have believed that they believed it. Does that mean it counted as true then, or not? Today, almost unanimously, all citizens across America would say that they believe that statement is moral truth. And rightly so. We should be glad we've gotten to this point. The truth has made it this far from where we were 200 years ago. Today we view slavery as evil, and absolutely rightly so. America might never fully reckon with being a nation that supported and upheld slavery. Even though if you traced back in human history, you would find the first place to ban slavery in the world and have it remain banned until today, not go back, is Ohio in 1802. Human civilization couldn't truly agree on something as obvious to us as freedom for all people from slavery and indentured servitude or debt slavery anywhere in the world until the 19th century. Truth and how it evolves helps us understand and know our history and development. It keeps us grounded. It shows us how far we've come on the journey to who we will be as people. And also, changing truth over time shows us that we have to stand up for the truths we believe in, because truths can change, just as our reality, the world around us, changes. And we can make society a better place by how we learn and grow as people, as nations, and as religions too. Going back to the time of the rabbis, who were working on a body of oral law that would come to be recorded as the Talmud in the 2nd through 7th centuries of the Common Era, we see that Jewish truths weren't necessarily objective. The rabbis were experts in developing text and tradition to reveal moral truths for the Jewish people. I believe truth to the rabbis is what they could interpret from the Torah. Said another way, the Torah contains the truths we need, even if we have to dig and move a few things around to find it. The beauty of this ideology is that rabbis today can continue the project of rabbis throughout history in the interpretation of the Talmud and the biblical source material. Professor Ronald Dworkin wrote, "Interpretation of a text attempts to show it as the best work of art it can be, and the pronoun insists on the difference between explaining a work of art and changing it into a different one." The brilliance of the complicated hermeneutical techniques developed by rabbinic work over millennia is that they allow the text to speak in a deeper way than the pshat, the surface level, without changing the inherent meaning of the text, without changing its true authorship or source. We can claim that chain of tradition all the way back to biblical times without writing a new Bible every few hundred years. This helps us avoid the pitfalls some encounter when trying to modernize our texts and their messages. There is enough wisdom inherent in our tradition, enough that is true, without altering or misappropriating it. Once the previous relationship to meaning is lost, i.e. the precedent, what came before, we will have unmoored our holy texts from the strength of tradition, i.e. what made them holy in the first place. If we were to hold on to a freely interpretive chain enterprise view of Jewish tradition, we would lose the critical distinction between literature and religion, as anything could be added or subtracted, which would then break that chain. In the end, it is a delicate balance. Torah may not be in heaven, but its age and source mean we must be delicate with our interpretation, lest we break it. Yet truth evolves with us, and interpretation is how we can practice a living and relevant Judaism, instead of merely living in the past. But did the rabbis break truth in the first place? Was their interpretation of the Tanakh totally true? My friends and I have that conversation all the time. After all, can their approach represent truth when they develop legal fictions to ease their way? Scholar Christine Hayes wrote, "At times appeals to objective measures of truth in the Talmud are openly and explicitly overruled in favor of other considerations. We know fiction isn't truth, but through interpretation within the bounds set by those who came before us, we have seen that the rabbis can make important changes for good reasons. We needed a system with fair processes, or what could have been considered fair within their own era, that is supported through everyone's common belief in the system, or religious structure that sustains or establishes that legal system. Furthermore, as ontological truth could be very difficult, if not impossible, to determine at times across Jewish populations in vast empires like Rome and Persia, especially in a relatively quick way, if at all, a system of legal fictions could convince the population that divine justice was swift and accurate, or explainable when it wasn't. It's not merely that their interpretations can often make fulfilling many other religious obligations more reasonable, such as the legal fiction of the Eruv, where a string around a city can make the whole city within the string a part of the private domain, like it's your house. It also shows those of us working today and those of us who teach congregations that we can all be a part of the process and can make significant innovations to Jewish tradition. The rabbis have, in this way, already established that even some fictions can show us other truths. But in a world without internet, or even the Pony Express, how were they supposed to know what facts were? How was anyone supposed to believe what was reported by other people? In case my speaking about the legal fictions of the rabbis made you lose confidence in their commitment to truth, here's another example. The rabbis made conviction in criminal cases dependent on the testimony of two good witnesses and interrogated those witnesses with gusto, as was laid out in Deuteronomy. While they were concerned about letting guilty people roam free, according to Dr. Chaya Halberstam, the closest thing the Mishnah comes to the notion of objective truth is in stipulating the reaction of the convict's family after the execution. The relatives are required to ask after the welfare of the judges and the witnesses, quote, as if to say that we have nothing against you in our hearts, that you have rendered a true judgment. That's from Mishnah Sanhedrin. The word truth is never applied by the rabbinic authors of the Mishnah to describe the legal decision, but rather it is the work of the court, having followed their equivalent of due process under the law, that is true. This leads me to the truth as I understand it, being that humans can only judge other humans in the fairest way available at the time. The rabbis couldn't uphold a system that didn't try to impart justice on earth, but they had no capacity to render divine justice or to know the absolute truth in any situation. Sure, there were punishments for Eidim Zomimim, or lying witnesses, but they couldn't really know if they got it right. Where does this leave truth and the rabbis? I think it makes them a model for us today, as Rodfei Emet, or pursuers of truth. That's what we should aspire to be. Every person, Jewish or otherwise, through development in interpretation of the Tanakh and Talmud up to the modern day, we continue to make Judaism not only relevant, but have found ways for Judaism to reflect modern truths without completely disregarding ancient truths. Through their pursuit of justice and judicial fairness, we are encouraged to come closer to true justice in the world as we learn more about what it means to be truly just. Perhaps this endeavor is what Pirkei Avot teaches about when we learn that it is not incumbent upon us to finish this work, but neither are we free to abandon it. It is the work of previous generations, of our generation, and of every generation yet to come. May we and they, those future generations, continue the work of progressing with society and Judaism towards truth. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.